Hey everyone, in today's video we're going to be talking about reference and coterminal angles. So you'll probably come across these two terms a lot in trigonometry, and it's always important to be able to identify the reference and coterminal angles because it'll help you solving trigonometric identities. It'll make that a lot easier. So on the left over here I have a quick little graph just to show you a little terminology. Whenever you have an angle on a graph, there's always going to be two sides to that angle. There's going to be the initial side, as you can see over here, and the terminal side. The initial side will always lie along an x-axis and most likely going to be this axis over here. So it just lies along that side. And it always stays that same. So it stays stationary. It will never move. It's just going to stay there. Now your terminal side is the one that'll move. So, and it'll also sort of form the angle. So it forms the angle and it gives the angle its identity kind of. So like your terminal angle over here is halfway between these two axes, and that means it's a 45-degree angle and it's the terminal side. This is the terminal side of the angle, this line over here. Now let's say that you draw your terminal side of the angle over here. So we draw this line over here, then technically this would be your initial side as always. So this line over here is always going to be your initial side and this is going to be your terminal side. But one difference is that the angle will be different. So this angle will now span across over here and it's likely going to be greater than 90 degrees. So your angle will change if your terminal line sort of changes. So it's important to know these two different terms because they'll come into use a lot in trigonometry. So by definition, a reference angle is the angle that the terminal side makes with the x-axis. So let's say you have an angle on a graph. So this is going to be your angle and it has a measure of 45 degrees. Now, your terminal side is always this side, the one that's changing. So the one that I've highlighted with green. Your initial side is this one, the one that I've highlighted with pink because it's along the x-axis. So the angle between your terminal side and the x-axis is your reference angle. So obviously this is the x-axis, this axis over here. So this angle between the two will be your reference angle. Now in this case, they both have the same measure. The angle and the reference angle are both 45 degrees, but it will not always stay that way, and you'll see that when we do a couple of examples. So that's all you really need to know for reference angles. One more point that you'll need to sort of identify on the graph is you're going to need to know that on this end of the x-axis, it's either 0 degrees or 360 degrees. They're both technically the same. And then this is 90 degrees, this is 180, and this is 270. So technically, if your graph terminal side is over here and it's halfway between 90 and 180, then it would be 135 degrees. This would be your angle. Why? Because halfway between 90 and 180 would be 135. So you're going to need to know certain points like that. Let's work on a couple of examples now. Okay, so we're going to work on some examples for reference angles now. I have 3 different graphs over here, and I've labeled 3 different angles. So let's look at the first graph. On the first question, we see that we have an initial side over here and a terminal side over here, and our angle is 210 degrees. Now we want to find the reference angle, and the reference angle is the side between the terminal side. So this is the terminal side and the x-axis. Where's the x-axis? This is the x-axis, so this entire line. So where's the angle? Well, obviously the terminal side and the x-axis, the closest x-axis make an angle over here. So that's going to be your reference angle if they ask you to point it out. Now, if you want to solve for the reference angle, now here's what you need to do. So you know that by definition, this is 180 degrees, so at this point. So that means this graph is 180 degrees. Now your 210 degree graph is extending a bit over 180. So if you do 210 minus 180, you'll find that extension and it's just 30 degrees. So that means your reference angle for this question is 30 degrees. So you're extending beyond that 180 point by 30 degrees to form your 210 degree angle. And that's why you need to know what angle comes with each part of the axis. So let's do our second example. As you can see, we have a graph over here. We have an initial side over here and a terminal side over here, and this is our angle. It's 300 degrees. So what is the reference angle? Obviously, it's between the terminal side, so this is t, and the x-axis, which is here. So it's going to be this angle is our reference angle. Now, how do you find the exact measure of the reference angle? Well, you know that this part of the axis is either 0 or 360 degrees. You know that you have an angle of 300 degrees. So if this entire angle is 360 degrees and you have this portion of it, so if you have this portion of it, you can just do 360 minus 300, which is just 60 degrees. So 60 degrees is the measure of your reference angle. So it's sort of like algebra and just filling in the blanks and finding the measure of the angle. So let's do our last example that we have over here. Let's do number 3. As you can see, it's pretty simple. We have an initial side over here and a terminal side over here. I'm going to label that T. We have an angle of 120 degrees. Now, you want to find the angle between the reference angle, or the terminal side, and the x-axis. This is the x-axis, and that's the terminal side, so this is going to be your angle. It's always going to be the x-axis closest. It's not going to be this, because that's too far. So this is your closest x-axis, so this is your reference angle. Now, how do you find the measure of the reference angle? Well, you know that this point of the graph has 180 degree measure. And if you have 120 over here, it's just a matter of 180 minus 120, which is just going to be 60 degrees. All I'm doing is you have 120 over here, and you know that this entire thing is 180, so you're just subtracting the two to find the angle of this, which is your reference angle, which is just 60 degrees. So now we're going to be talking about coterminal angles. So coterminal angles are basically angles where you add or subtract 360 degrees or 2 pi. So let's look at this example over here. We have 45 degrees graphed. Adding 360 would literally just be going around the graph and coming again to that exact same point. So that's adding 360. So to find the coterminal angle of 45 degrees, all you have to do is just add 360. So you're going to get 405. So that's going to be your coterminal angle. You can also find coterminal angles by subtracting. So 450 minus 360 is another way of finding a coterminal angle, except that one would be negative, and this is a positive coterminal angle. So that's all there is to coterminal angles. If you have an angle of, let's say, 2 pi, which is if you're doing it in radians and not degrees, you can add or subtract 2 pi to get your coterminal angle. So it can either be 0 or it can be 4 pi. Those are your two coterminal angles for 2 pi. And remember, you can add as many as you want. So if you want to get another coterminal angle of 45, it would literally go around the graph once and twice and come back. And all you would do is just 45 plus 360 plus 360. And that's all you need to know about coterminal angles. You can also do 45 minus 360 and minus 360 if you want to get an even larger or smaller negative number. That's all there is to coterminal angles, and it's adding or subtracting however many 360s and however many 2 pi's you want.